often we found ourselves in the middle of really important conversations on how the business will be driven into the future, right? I don't want to waste time explaining about the super app, but Tony Fernandez, the group CEO, has this vision about creating this super app for ASEAN a long time ago, and bringing and bridging all the businesses that includes the airline and all the other sister companies that are around. Teleport, that is the logistics branch, the food, the groceries, the e-commerce, all the stuff together is been in his head for a long time. And putting all these things together is not an easy task. And definitely there is a business case around those things, but how do you bring it in a coherent way? So this is where design tries to ease out the curve of learning for customers that are loyal to the airline that these new things are available, and new customers that they don't actually understand what's going on or what's AirAsia or the AirAsia super app about. So I'll say our role is really challenging because there's many things happening at the same time. We have these new businesses and we have these old businesses, and bridging the gap between the understanding of how the new businesses work and how the old businesses needs to adapt or change or evolve into this new wave of business models, right? Subscription and like all the new things that the technology enables you to be able to do is really important that there's a strong and coherent process attached to it. And I think that's where design brings the most value, right? Bringing awareness of what are the possible tools that we have to get to know better what are the customer pain points, how we can translate those pain points into insights, how those insights can transform and add value to the business and the customers at the same time. So enabling these conversations and facilitating this process is probably the core responsibility that we have. And in some cases, it's really, really challenging because we need to sort of adapt to the transformation that the company is going through. So for example, you have people that have been working in the airline with a really strong commercial mindset, doing business in a way, and we are proposing completely different models that they break apart their understanding on how to drive customers, what drive customers, and what is the benefit of doing all these things. So there's a lot of evangelism and advocacy work happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So we have, depending on the area of focus, we have different key responsibilities, right? But that's a really short overview of what we do.
Yeah, thank you for excuse me. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's also very progressive for traditionally an airline company to think about all these number of things and to actually invest in hiring a leader like yourself to lead these initiatives. How do you help or how do you ease in the people who have a more traditional mindset, right, where they perceive design as something that's a little bit more about visuals and aesthetics? How do you kind of like ease them into the conversation that, hey, like design deserves a seat at a table, design has it's also very useful for business?
I think there's many perspectives that we can cover when you ask me that question. I'll try to focus on what's my experience in AirAsia, because otherwise we can theorize about many different situations. But when you find yourself in an organization that is in a level of understanding that is different, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to understand what is the value that you bring. And understand, I'm going to understand or emphasize the part of understanding, because usually what happens is you're going to talk about a lot of things. You're going to use the design jargon to talk about double diamonds and like workshop facilitations and user research or specific methodologies that you're going to point out, and people won't know what you're talking about. they might have an idea of the phrase, but they won't really understand what you're referring to. So I think the first thing that we need to realize is, in order for your stakeholders to understand, you need to sort of rephrase and rethink how you communicate all the things that you plan to do and what are the outcomes that you expect to create, right? And ask a lot of feedback and try to find what are the correct channels where you can get feedback from your stakeholders to have a really good grasp of their understanding of the impact of your work. And this you need to do for at least for the first phases of your work. You need to do this constantly. Communicate to a level of understanding that you can ensure that their understanding is coming through both ways, and then aligning with their objectives and trying to be of a service of understanding their objectives, and talk talk in a language that they can understand. You can use business terms instead of design terms, and align your objectives with their objectives so they can perceive you as a contributor to their success. I think that's the main core driver for gaining the influence that you need in order for later tell them, oh, we're going to run a workshop to do this crazy thing and we want to invite you. And they will be really happy to participate because they already know they have certain investment in you and you have certain investment in them. And there's a relationship of trust built already over time and effort. So I'll say that's the most impactful thing that I did, that it helped me go through a lot of challenging situations where people didn't understand what they felt threatened because they couldn't understand what I was referring to, or they felt out of place, or I was out of place. You know, to avoid all these uncomfortable situations, you need to sort of wiggle through the cracks, trying to be, try to adapt yourself to the environment, and then try to change the environment variables to be more suitable for then the design process to take its natural place, right? That is, obviously, have a really good understanding of the customer, have space for doing discovery that often doesn't happen in all companies. All companies are focusing on, all mindsets. I don't want to generalize, but in the most common scenario is like, oh, you need to deliver design, deliver screens, deliver pixels, and that's the sole focus on the only thing that they see value of design role. Where if you bring all these new conversations and talk about how we can together create this value for the customer, and then you can start mapping this out in a nice way, and after you build all this influence and they start noticing how your work actually builds up to their objectives and contributing to their success, then it becomes evident that you're a key part of the change. You're a key driver for change, right?
Yeah, that is so true. And I think some really, really good advice, as I'm hearing you say, it seems like it's good to have a one-on-one conversation, especially with stakeholders who don't quite understand the value of design. It's good to just maybe ease them into it by inviting them, by not using any complicated terms, by speaking their language. So all those seems like really, really good advice. I was wondering, in your experience, where design is usually like an outsourced functionality, right? Where people actually get an agency to do it or get a consulting firm to do it. What are your thoughts about building an in-house design team or growing and grooming an in-house design team? Where does that make sense? Yeah.
That's a great question, and I think I need to go to a rule of thumb to prioritize things, right? when you're in an environment where the company there's so many variables, right? But what I will say is, you'll invest in building an in-house design team when design becomes a bottleneck to achieve whatever you want to achieve, right? When it doesn't become the bottleneck, then it's fine to outsource that to another company where you can just monitor. But at one point, it becomes a blocker. that you start having challenges with people, they don't understand exactly what you want to do, or they're not achieving the quality or the alignment that you're looking for or you're expecting, then you will consider bringing them in and embedding the design into your organization, right? I use that as a rule of thumb, to when I advise to any other startups. I always tell them, like, if you're planning to hire designers, only hire designers when you feel that design is the bottleneck. If you have a grip on it, or you can outsource it and that works for you, then don't do it, because it's a cost. It becomes a cost. It doesn't come. So you need to sort of create that tipping point of value when you say, okay, I'm going to have a designer in-house because I have all these other objectives. Like, I want them to work with the engineer in the nitty-gritty performance thing, or creating different things that the outsourcing team cannot make for me. And I will definitely recommend having an in-house design team when you're talking about doing design as a differential value in your service or product. If that's really, really core of your business or product, then by all means cultivate everyone in your team, not just the designers, everyone in your team, to use design principles of quality and define the standards that are needed to define the added value that you want to bring to your service or your product, right? Like the back of the drawer philosophy that Apple has. Like that philosophy exists even in engineering teams. It's not just design, right? So if you have that mindset, if it's important for your company and your culture, then by all means do it. But the last thing I want to say is, but it doesn't mean that you need to have a super big design team. You just need to have a strong design culture, right? Where you address these conversations at a level that everyone in the company is involved in design and providing an added value into your service, right?
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. And let's talk a little bit about AirAsia, right? We would traditionally consider the airline industry as a service industry. So you mentioned about designing products and building products. We know AirAsia has announced its ambition to build a super app. So that's a digital product. But let's say for a more traditional like service company, can they actually think about building products, or should they be thinking about building products using the design process? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit of a loaded question, right? I feel the design process applies for any problem solving of any kind in any industry. And now, if they should build products, if you're a service company and you want to build products, I'll say always that your product solves a pain point in your service. Sure, you need to build a product. You need to address that product as part of the solution for a problem that at the end of the day is going to make your service better. if your sole purpose is servicing, right? Yeah. For example, traditionally you book the flight and then you go to the airport, you do the checking and your baggage and everything. You do it with face-to-face in a counter, right? Nowadays, you don't need to do that anymore. You just like check in online, you select your seat, you add your add-ons, your insurance. You can, say, I'm gonna check these packages, and then you reach to the airport, everything is automated. So we have products, digital products, to enhance the service, sort of saying, right? That's why we do have, or the face recognition features to check in automatically, or clear immigration, or clear the boarding gates, etc. Right? So that's an example of a product augmenting the service, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like with this process called design, or your UX, user experience design, or design thinking, as some people call it, it seems like it's able to actually make the customer service process a little bit more streamlined, and it sounds like it's able to even in some cases delight the customer, or even save some costs, right? Because like if in the airline you don't have a check-in counter, you don't need to have a person manning the check-in counter. and the customer can actually self-service and do it themselves, which is also kind of what we're seeing right now for at least like in Changi airport in Singapore. So I was wondering if you have other examples of like how design drove like business impact, whether it's like cost savings, whether it's like revenue growth in other industries, or from your experience like working in other companies.
Many. Probably the most impactful and relevant, I think some of the people who went through your classes already familiar with, because I talk about it before, is how in Lazada we focus on improving the lead time of delivery for parcels. When, you know, to improve the time that from when customers buy something to that parcel reach out to them, that lead time, in order to improve it, we have to go and deconstruct an entire logistic infrastructure. And we use design process to understand each step of the parcel. So at that point, we started mapping the journey of a parcel instead of the journey of a customer, and trying to understand how we can improve the journey in the sense of performance. And we managed to find a lot of touch points through the parcel journey where we could just simplify and reduce costs and simplify the processes, and improve the experience of the people who service the parcel to move to point A to point B, right? There was many workers in the warehouse that they were involved in this process. So by having a human-centric lens and the design process itself as a framework, you can go and focus on zooming into problems that the workers or pain points that the workers have on their day-to-day basis that actually are making the parcel delay. So by focusing on the workers and solving their pain points, then you have shorter lead times for the parcel to reach the actual customer in an e-commerce platform. But that's something that you can argue that the design process help us uncover unseen opportunities to impact not just the saving cost part of the company, because we managed to save a lot of money a year by tackling these little pain points here and there. You can also impact the end customer at the end of the day, right? By helping humans doing their work more efficiently, you reduce the cost of the operation, you reduce the time of the parcel journey, you make the delivery time faster. So the customer has a better experience at the end of the day. So I feel that these tools help you deconstruct the process in a way that then you can zoom in and zoom out from different perspectives and either improve the tools, the conditions, the processes, systems, right? Because there's many parts, there are many moving parts there. And it's like magnifying glass that allows you to look closer into each little thing and say, oh, here's the thing we can fix. Here's the cost we can reduce. And this is definitely impactful and conducive to have a better user experience, right? When you can, and that project was really challenging because it wasn't finding out the problems or fixing the problems. It was like getting the buy-in from senior management to do the investment, right? And it was a lot of, we had to do a lot of storytelling, a lot of, empathizing with the people involved, and do a lot of business estimations on how much performance to increase, on how much money that this translate to. So it was a really, really interesting project that allow us as designers and researchers to learn a lot of things that otherwise we wouldn't have learned about the logistic process, the service excellence teams, the operational challenges, etc. That's what I like about being a designer. When you dive into a problem and it's like completely unknown terrain, and you sort of like start measuring and mapping and doing all these things, and suddenly you become somewhat of a, I don't want to say an expert, but a knowledgeable part of the organization that can help and contribute and add a lot of value by connecting the dots, connecting the logistics with the user experience with the buy button in the screen, right? That it seems completely unrelated. Everything is connected.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds like it helped not only to deliver a better customer experience, but also help the company to save costs. I'm just wondering, like, in case someone's curious, how long did it take to execute from like start to end for this particular project, and how how many people were involved exactly? Yeah, that were actively involved.
Actively involved, 3 people.
3 people.
And then there was actively like doing leading the whole enterprise forward. But it was so challenging because there were so many teams that we have to contribute. We asked for help to many people, from people who build systems, people who look at the processes, people who operate in the warehouse, leaders that train the workers, people who work, managers in the warehouse, manager in the logistic administration, all the people in the app and the buyer experience in Lazada, the senior management in the logistic branch, because it's a completely different company, the Lazada senior management. So there was a lot of people involved in the project, but we were 3 key design researchers and designers working on understanding the problem and facilitating the conversations, bringing people together into a workshop, traveling to different locations. The first month we solely did discovery. So we did a lot of research. And then we did another month of mix of research and definition of the problems. And then at the end of these first 2 to 3 months, we had an array of different projects that we can tackle, because obviously each project we cannot drive ourselves. We have sort of to delegate and facilitate to other teams. So roughly the entire thing must have taken half a year. And then for the first phase of the first projects, and then it extended to another year. And I heard from people who are still in Lazada that they're still working on the same line of improvements and performance and whatnot.
Yeah.
Many of the standards that we define are now being used for the new warehouses that they're building here and there.
Wow. It sounds like half a year of effort with 3 people, saving millions of dollars. That's a lot of money. And then now there's continued savings, continued improvements in customer experience, moving on even after you left the organization.
Yeah, it will be really difficult to put one fixed number, but I think for that first year of effort, you could because we measure many improvements in performance in specific places in the warehouse. So you could say it saves this fixed amount of money for these particular operations, and then you can escalate and estimate to all the warehouses combined.
And I'm just gonna put myself in the shoes of the management at that time. Do you think this problem could be solved by a couple of consultants? Because I don't know. I mean, you were in-house in the team. Do you think like a digital consultancy could come in and actually take a look at a problem and try and solve it? It does sound very expensive if it's a 6 month project.
You're right. I never thought about it, but yeah, it could be really expensive. If your question is if they could solve it, I think they could if they had enough time and involvement in all, because being in-house, I think the benefit is you already created a lot of relationships with different teams and different people.
Yeah. And
you are an influential part of an organization already, and you can just navigate easier between all the red tape that you need. If you're a consultant, you need to ask for permissions for all these things. So I'll say that the difference will probably be consultants can do it, definitely, but it will be more expensive for sure, because it will take more time to uncover, to connect, and to navigate through all this sea of different relationships that you need to build. When you're in-house, you can sort of, I think your network, your internal network will allow you to discover things that often aren't seen, because you can have this coffee conversation with people in the warehouse and it's like, oh, what about this? What about that? And then you stay connected with that person. Once you create that relationship, you establish that node. And then you go back to your office and you can think about the problem, and anytime you can just like, hey, I've been thinking about this, call the guy and hey, I've been thinking about this, what do you think? And then you can quickly re-elaborate or revisit many parts or many aspects of your research, or you can just pop up one day and it's like, arrange your security clearance like really quick because you already know the person's there. I guess it's easier it's way easier if you already have this network of influence, right?
Yeah, that's really good to know, and I think it does sound like a very worthwhile investment to have just a couple of designers, and they can make such a big impact on an operational related problem. And one of my last questions would be, now it's the pandemic. There seems to be a lot of businesses of different sizes. They are struggling. Some of them are getting disrupted by tech startups. Some of them, they are actually struggling because, of the restrictions of COVID and the change in customer behavior. I was just wondering, as a design leader, do you have any advice or any tips for people who run these businesses, right? Like what can they do in order to thrive or to survive the pandemic situation? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess if I have to choose one advice, I'll say focus on solving an actual problem to your customers. Find what is that pain point that is differential, that you believe is differential, that will contribute to your vision or adjust your vision to that. I don't know, either or. But try to focus on an actual pain point, something that actually adds value to your customers. Because if you manage to do that, then they will promote the product for you. They will, completely, they're going to be adopting your solution, and they're going to bring more people into it because they actually feel that this actually brings value to whatever they're doing in whatever venture you have, right? And value can mean many things for different customers in different contexts. So it depends on what's your product, what's your service. It might mean something different, right? So copying from other people might not be the solution.
Yeah, and you're so right about that, because so many people just copy other competitors, assuming that competitors actually know better what they're doing. So I was just wondering, as someone who has designed new products, what kind of signs can we look out for that actually would give us a good indication that we're solving the right problem or the right pain point?
Well, there are many signs. I think the signs that you're going to look at for that particular scenario that you're designing for, they vary in scenario by scenario, I guess, right? But I think the strongest signal is always have a direct channel with your customers. If it's qualitative or quantitative feedback, combination of both. Have a really good connection with your direct customers, right? If it's like running interviews, if it's looking at Google Analytics, if it's through a widget in a homepage that says, give me feedback or whatever, pay a lot of attention to that. That's a really strong signal. And there's many secondary signals that you can look at in terms of how a product performs or a service performs that you need to define when you're looking at the product that you're designing and what is the success, how does that success look like? You're expecting to have an outcome like people buying products. Okay, how you break those behaviors down into input metrics that can give you, okay, the accumulation of all these input metrics can give me people buying products. And that could mean adding items to your cart, visits in your website, a combination of click here and scroll there. But they need to be thought in a way that analyzing that particular behavior will end up creating the outcome that you're expecting, right? So that's a formula of input and output metrics that is really important. But I still believe the strongest signal is chat with your customer directly, if you can. If you cannot, indirectly, but have that channel open.
Yeah, and it sounds like you kind of get an indication of what that pain point or problem is, and does it like sort of fit with what you understand? My last question is like, do you have any predictions or trends, in terms of the role of UX beyond the pandemic moving forward? I see AirAsia trying to really hard to transform its business and growing its business verticals. So do you have any thoughts like how you see UX playing a role post-pandemic?
If you look at the trend right now, the UX role the demand of UX is growing and growing and growing all the time since UX started. And you can definitely estimate that at one point, and the technology becomes more accessible for startups, right? You have no code, some code. Any person with a little bit of training can already put out products and services in the digital world. So if the technology doesn't become a denominator like it was in the 90s and 2000s, right? Like a differentiator, I have this technology and nobody else have it. If that is out of the table, the only differentiator is going to be the user experience. So definitely is gaining a lot of relevance, and definitely in the future is probably going to be the main driver for success.
Well, that is excellent, and we're really glad to be part of this equation and this ecosystem as well, training mid-career professionals and helping companies by coaching them. So Natan, thank you for your time, and we wanted to keep this very short and simple. There was just so much golden nuggets over here that I had to go over time a little bit, but really appreciate your time over here today. And with that, I think I'll pass to Logaz, my team member, to share a little bit about what we do, and then we'll end off the call. Yeah.
Thanks, Dalen. So thank you, Nathan and Dalen, for your time today, and for the rest of y'all who've joined us today during our lunchtime. So we have some courses and business trainings that might be useful for you, and you can always reach out to us. So we have a career conversions program for product managers right now that's going on, and we also have UX and CX courses. We have design thinking courses, and also customized masterclasses. And if you need, we also provide group and individual coaching. So I'll drop in the chat box about our business email, so you can drop us an email if you have any questions. And feel free to connect with Dalen and Nathan on LinkedIn if you have any queries or doubts. So that's the end. And we'll also be sharing this video on YouTube, so do keep a lookout if you need to catch some of the golden nuggets that Dalen mentioned about. So yep, thank you for your time. And yes, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can scan the QR code. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Logaz. And thank you so much, everyone, for taking your lunch. And we hope you have a good lunch, and we'll be seeing you hopefully on a regular basis in the coming months. We're really trying to frame the conversation that is a little bit more strategic around design. So if you like what you're hearing today, we're going to be inviting more speakers. Do also give us some feedback. Next month, we'll actually be inviting someone from Amazon. So do keep a lookout for your newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, please keep a lookout for that. So with that, please have a good week and a good work day ahead. And thank you once again to our speaker, Natan, and please give him a round of virtual applause and cheers. All right. Thank you.